Hi, my name is Anna and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going through my 2025 reading stats and all the books that I read last year. So in 2025, I had a goal of 20 books, I think 20 books, and I read 29 books. I had a whole variety of genres. I had everything from a 2-star all the way up to a 5-star. And surprisingly, a lot of the books that I read were books that I owned. And I think what happened was I was buying these books and then borrowing a lot of them through Libby and mostly reading them on my Kindle, even though I owned the physical copies. But we will get to that more in a little bit. Let's start with my average rating. So I have my notes right here. So if I'm looking down, that's what's happening. I had 1 5-star, 11 4-stars, 13 3-stars, 2 2-stars, 0 1-stars, which is great, and 2 no ratings. And it came out to a 3.4 star rating average, which I guess is okay. I think it was skewed just a little bit just because of some of the books that I read that I definitely knew weren't necessarily going to be 4 stars. So I think that was part of what lowered my average for this last year. And that's probably going to skew it a little bit for this year as well, but we'll get more into that. I also read from 11 new to me authors and 9 authors I've read from before. I had 1 audiobook and the rest I think were like a mix of physical and ebooks. I think maybe I only read like 1 book that was just the physical copy, and all the rest I read like either both physical copy and ebook, or it was just purely on my Kindle. For the genres that I read 8 middle grade, which I think this is also skewed a little bit. These are the books that are kind of skewing this a little. I think that my average rating and my genres that I read and things like that would be different if it did not include a series of unfortunate events. These are all middle grade. I didn't expect them to be really highly rated. I just kind of wanted to go through them again. I don't usually read middle grade, so 8 middle grade for last year, that was a lot. Other than those ones that I will be reading this year, I don't expect that I will have any other ones. So I read 8 middle grade, 6 mystery thriller, 4 fiction, 3 nonfiction, 2 YA, 2 historical fiction, 1 fantasy, 1 Christian fiction, 1 sci-fi, and 1 romance. I did not keep track of the books that I purchased this past year. I could have maybe guessed, but I thought that that would probably be too much of a guess and I would probably be wrong. I am mostly kind of just going off of books that I owned, books that were given to me, stuff like that. So 20 books I owned. Again, I don't know how many of those I actually purchased last year and how many of them I already owned. So I can't share how many books I purchased. I don't know. I am keeping track of that this year, but last year, no idea. So 20 owned, 3 ARCs, 3 free, which the free ones came from Amazon First Reads. 2 borrowed, and 1 was a gift. So let's just go over every book that I read last year. Some of these I'm going to have to guess a little bit. I think for the most part I know what I rated all of these, but unfortunately I don't know why this is happening, but Goodreads is deleting my star ratings on some of my books, and also it deleted I think a couple of my reviews, and I have no idea why, but I noticed it when I went to like click on a few of my books to see what I had rated them last year. It showed the rating and then all of a sudden it disappeared, and the same thing happened with one of my reviews. As soon as I clicked on it, I could see it, and then all of a sudden it disappeared and it was gone. So I'm not going to click on any of these just in case. I don't want that happening again. So the first book that I finished last year was Eragon. This was a YA, a reread, and for the genres that I put all of these in, I did not put them in 2 different ones. When they're added up, I wanted it to come out to 29. I didn't want them in like multiple ones, and I don't know, that seemed like it would be kind of confusing. So obviously this is a fantasy, but I listed it under YA just for my stats. This is the first book in the Inheritance cycle. I don't really think I need to talk too much about this. Most people know what this is. A lot of people have read it. If you are a fantasy reader, I would highly suggest it, even if you don't usually read YA. I don't. But I still love this series. And I believe I rated this like a 3.5 or 3.75. It wasn't quite a 4-star. I think the one that I'm currently reading probably will be, but this one was like in the 3-star range, but really enjoyed it and I would recommend this one. I did read that, I think, mostly as an ebook. I don't even think that I opened up the physical copy at all. So that was probably just purely an ebook. I think maybe I listened to part of it on audio, and I'm actually doing that with the second one right now. So now that I'm thinking about it, I do think that I listened to part of it on audio, but for the most part, that was an ebook. Next up was Beartown. This one, I know that I gave a 2-star, but I think honestly it probably could have been in the 1-star range. I didn't really care for this book. I think I liked the setting. I think I kind of liked the storyline a little bit, or the idea that he had for the story. I learned this year that I don't really care for Bachman's writing, and I know a lot of people really love him. I don't think he's for me. This was the first book that I read by him. I read another one this past year. I didn't like, the characters were very unlikable in the story. It also had really strong language, so if that's something you're sensitive to, I would probably avoid this one. I didn't like the conversations between the characters. I didn't like the way that they talked to each other. It just was not a good book for me, and I am definitely not going to finish this series. I also had been hesitant to pick this up because it's like a hockey book, and I've heard a lot of people say this, that they're not like a sports person, and so they don't really think they're going to have much interest in this book because of that, but find out that it's not just about hockey. It's not really all about hockey, and really that's not the focus, and I would agree. So I was hesitant picking this up because of that. And I think if the language had been better, if the characters had been more likable, if it had been written a little bit differently, I would have actually enjoyed this. But unfortunately, this book did not work out for me. I believe I listed this under fiction. So for my fiction category, that was including like contemporary fiction, literary fiction. Those were kind of all just in that general fiction genre for me. I didn't want to break it up too much and then have just like this pie chart that's just a whole bunch of tiny little slivers that just has one book in it. So I wanted to keep a lot of the fiction together. So that is what I listed that under. I think I probably read this one both as an ebook, and I read the physical copy for part of it as well. Okay, next up, I'm not going to do all of these separate. I'm just going to kind of group all these together. The next one that I had read was the first book in the series of Unfortunate Events, but I'm just going to go ahead and talk about all 8 of them right now. I read the first 8 this past year, and these were all the middle grade that I read, and I gave all of them anywhere between a 3 and a 3.25. I went into these knowing that I'm as an adult, I'm not going to like them as much as I liked them as a child, but I was curious to read through them again just because I remember loving them so much. And back then, these were probably 5-star books for me. As an adult, definitely in the 3-star range, but still good books. However, they are darker than I remember them being, and I'm not sure that I don't know. Would I let my kids read these? I'm not sure. I was actually, after the first book, I was like, wow, that was a little intense. And there's actually like quite a few like murders that happen in these books, and it was just kind of interesting. Some of the content, and it really is just a whole series of unfortunate things happening. So another thing about the books that I were reading as ebooks this past year. I don't think I purchased any of them. I think they were all books that I was getting through Libby. All of the books that I own that I read, half as the physical copy and half like ebook or however I did it, they were just borrowed from Libby. Okay, moving on to the next book that I read. This was a reread actually, and it was The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. I requested the second book in this duology from NetGalley, and I did receive it. And I had started the second book and realized that I could not remember anything that happened in this one. However, I did give this a 4-star. I don't know what I gave it the first time. I may have given it a 4-star the first time too, but I did give it a 4-star the second time that I read it this past year, and it was very good. Yeah, so I went back and reread this one before reading the next one. And this is a mystery. I wouldn't call this a thriller. I would call this a mystery for sure. And this follows our main character, Hannah, whose husband, Owen, suddenly disappears and just leaves a note that arrives at her front door from a child at his daughter's school. And it then follows Hannah and Owen's daughter, Bailey, as they try to figure out what happened to Owen. So that's this book. I really enjoyed that. I definitely want to read more mystery thrillers this year because I am realizing how much I missed reading those. That's actually one of my favorite genres, and I didn't read a whole lot of that last year. I think I said I read 6 mystery thrillers, which I guess that's okay, but out of 29 books, I'm kind of expecting to read a few more than that this year. Okay, the next book I read was The Secret Book of Floralia. I'm still not sure how to pronounce her name. For a while I was saying Flora Lee, but I realized I think it's like Leah or Leia. I liked this one. So this, I believe I gave a 4-star or a 4.25 or 4.5. Something like that. Again, I'm afraid to click on these because I don't want them to disappear, but I did rate this highly. I really enjoyed this. This is a historical fiction. It has like a dual timeline. It takes place during the Second World War and ahead, like, I don't know how many years ahead, like 20 years, maybe something like that. And it follows our main character, Hazel, and they were sent away to stay with another family, and during that time her sister disappears, and this follows Hazel as she tries to figure out what may have happened to her sister. And this story that she had told her sister during that time that was meant to be like their secret story, their secret place, suddenly it emerges in this book, and Hazel finds this book and realizes this is her story. This is the story that she was telling her sister. And so she is now trying to figure out, is her sister still alive? Where did the story come from? How did it end up written down? Because the two of them were the only ones that ever heard it. It was something that they kept to themselves. And so this was really good. It was definitely a book that I would recommend. Those last two, I think I also read pretty much just on my Kindle. I'm pretty sure. Next up was another, I guess, historical fiction. That's what I listed this under, but even the author does not have an answer for what genre her books should be in because it's kind of a variety. But this was The Fiery Cross. This is the 5th book in the Outlander series, and I believe I gave this a 4-star. To be totally honest, when I have really long series like this, and especially like really long books like this, I realize they kind of like flow into each other when I'm reading them. And so I don't know exactly which books certain things happened in, but I remember the story. I just don't remember exactly which books they came from. So I could not really tell you what was happening in this one. Anyway, I really love this series. I am currently on the 6th book, but I have put it on pause. I realize these books have a lot of really intense content, a lot of the time things that are a little bit too much for me, and so I decided that I was going to take a break from these, and I'm not entirely sure if I'm going to go back to them. I think there are currently 9 books in this series. I can't remember if she's writing a 10th book or if the series is over. I want to say yes, there is going to be one more, but I don't know for sure. Yes, I am like 5.5 books through this series, and I don't know if I'm going to finish it, but I would still recommend them. I really like these books. If you are not super sensitive to like violence in books or anything too descriptive in that area, then this might be okay for you. But that is pretty much what I struggled with with these, and especially because I read them in the middle of the night, I would sometimes end up having like really weird dreams. So I have put the 6th book on pause, and I'm not sure I'm going to go back to them, but I have loved the series up till this point, even though there has been some really intense scenes in these books. I was partially reading the physical copy. You can see my bookmark here. Apparently that was the point that I stopped, and I probably only read like a tiny bit in the middle of this and then went back to the ebook. But for some reason, I love these copies, these tiny little copies like this. I don't know what it is, but if I could have all of my books like this, I absolutely would. So I think that's the reason that I ended up picking this up as like to read the physical copy, is just because of like the book itself. Next up was my only other YA that I read this year, and that was Sunrise on the Reaping. This was also the only book that I have ever pre-ordered, and even though I pre-ordered it, I did not read it right away. I think I finished it in like July. I can't remember when it was released. I think I was in the middle of reading something else, and that was taking priority, and so I didn't read this right away even though I pre-ordered it. But I believe I gave this like a 4.5. I really loved this. This was, to me, a lot better than the previous book that came out, Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. That one I didn't like quite as much. This one was Haymitch's story, and I loved that. It was so good. Again, I don't really read YA, but of course, you know, if Suzanne Collins keeps coming out with more and more Hunger Games books, I'm going to keep buying them. So this one was good. I may have mostly read this. Oh my gosh, it's dusty. I may have mostly read this one as like the physical copy, just because at the time there was a really long wait for the ebook. I'm not even sure I ever got to the ebook. Next up, I'm realizing these are out of order on my Goodreads for some reason. Goodreads is just making a mess of my books for whatever reason. I don't know. The Housemaid was actually the last book that I read this past year, but since it's on here, I'm just going to talk about it right now. This was the last book that I finished in 2025, but I really liked this, and I was very surprised because I think I had talked about how I was uncertain about this book because of some of the content. However, the way that this was written and the things that happened in this book, it was, I don't want to say it was okay with me, but it worked for the story. And I ended up really liking it, and I liked the way that it was written, and I liked the pacing. And this is also a mystery thriller. I believe I gave this a 4 or a 4.5. I want to say like a 4.25. But this follows Millie, who is trying to get a job after some things happened in her life, and she is hired as a housekeeper and sort of a nanny for a woman named Nina and her husband Andrew and their daughter. Millie is basically trying to keep this job for certain reasons. She cannot lose this job, but realizes also that she needs to get away from this situation. So it was very good. It was interesting. And I think that a lot of people maybe can probably guess what is going to happen in this story. I really didn't have much of a clue until the end. And I think that's why I like mystery thrillers, is because I can't usually guess the ending of books. And I think it's probably because I'm usually so just into the story that I'm not thinking like, oh, I think this is going to happen, or I think this is going to happen. That's probably what makes these so fun. But I am definitely going to continue this series and probably read more of her books. I had heard that if you do not like this one, you may not like some of her other books, or any of her other books, I guess. I'm so glad that I liked this, because now I have a whole variety of mystery thrillers from this author I'm interested in and that I want to read and that are now open to me. And I'm super excited about that because, like I said, I wanted more thrillers this year. So I am looking forward to reading more of her books. The next book that I read was The Maid's Secret, which is the third book in the Molly the Maid trilogy, I guess. I think it's the last one. And this was an ARC that I was approved for. This was actually my first ARC that I received. I was very excited about this one because this was probably my most anticipated read. Probably this one and Sunrise on the Reaping for this past year. I am happy to say that it was in the 4-star range. I want to say it was a 4.5 for me. If you have not read The Maid, I would recommend it if you like quirky characters and mysteries that are really good mysteries but aren't too serious. I really enjoyed it and I would recommend reading this one. Next up was The Golden Spoon. This one was interesting because this is also a mystery thriller. I think I gave this like a 3.25 maybe, or a 3.5. I enjoyed it. It was not my favorite thriller, but it was good, and I'm glad I read it. If you enjoy watching the Great British Baking Show, this is a fun one because it really feels like she based this book off of that show and then just made it like a thriller. I don't know if she did, but I'm assuming she did because it had everything from like, you know, like the tent and all of that, and the mansion and stuff that's there on the property and all this stuff. And so it was a fun one. There was scenes of them baking in the tent along with like the thriller things that were happening, and it was very good, and I liked that one. I would maybe read more from this author. I'm not totally sure. I think she has a couple other books. I honestly can't remember. I think she does, and I don't know what they are. The next book that I read was an Amazon First Reads, and it was The Answer Is No by Fredrik Backman. This was the other one that I read by him, and this one I think I gave a 3, so it was a little bit better than Beartown. It didn't have like all the language and everything. It wasn't a super serious book. It was kind of silly. That may have been part of the reason that I didn't really love it. And I think it's just Bachman's writing. It's just not for me. I don't know what else to say about that. It was fine. It was silly. It followed our main character, Lucas, who does not like to be around people and just wants to be by himself in his apartment. And then a situation arises that brings a whole bunch of people to his apartment over and over again, and he is forced to interact with these people, and they're wanting him to help them solve this issue that is occurring, and it's just silly. The next book that I read, this one was gifted to me. It was called The Well-Watered Woman. This was a Christian nonfiction, and I didn't care for this one. I want to say maybe I gave it a 2 or a 3. I probably gave it like a 2. And this is one of the ones where my review disappeared, my star rating disappeared, so I really have no idea. I'm guessing. With Christian nonfiction, I need it to be like a deep theological book, and this wasn't that. I've come across quite a few books that are just kind of like, they almost feel a little surface level. They don't feel like they go very deep. It's like the author sharing like little stories of things that happen in their life and then like relating it back to scripture, or I don't know. It just didn't work for me. It wasn't my favorite. I think it has pretty high reviews. Yeah, it's like a 4.3 on Goodreads. So, I mean, it has good reviews from other people. So, it was probably just me. But when I am reading a Christian nonfiction and nonfiction, I guess in general, I'm looking for like really just deep thoughts, things that I could spend like a lot of time thinking about. Just one section of the book, one paragraph just has so much in it that I have to read it really slowly. And I don't know, there's just so much for me to pull out of it to apply to my life and the way that I live. And this just didn't have that for me. Next up was The Third Gilmore Girl. This was the only memoir that I read last year, and I actually listened to this just as an audiobook. It was good. I did not rate this one, so I had two books that I did not rate, and this was one of them. And I want to say maybe The Well-Watered Woman was the other one that I didn't rate. I don't know. Maybe I listed that one as a book that I didn't rate. I guess I did. But The Third Gilmore Girl, I did not rate this one. I think this year and from now on, I may rate memoirs. I wasn't rating them for a while, but I think I'm going to rate them just based on my enjoyment of the book itself and my experience either listening to it or reading it. I did enjoy going through this one. I did like hearing Kelly Bishop's life story, and I don't usually read a lot of memoirs. Especially with celebrities, I don't know, I'm not a huge fan of, I don't know how to explain it. I don't follow celebrities very closely, so I don't usually care to read the memoirs. It has to be maybe somebody in a show that I've really loved, which is what happened with this one. I picked this one up and I read Lauren Graham's as well, just because I love Gilmore Girls. I've watched it over and over again, and it's just interesting to hear the author's backstories. In this case, Kelly Bishop is very, very different from Emily Gilmore, and it's just funny listening to her story and realizing how much she is not like the character that she portrays, and she portrays her so well. It was not what I expected, and I think that just made it all the better. Next up was The Sublet by Greer Hendricks. This was also a Amazon First Reads. It was a short story, and I do not remember anything that happened in this book, but I gave it a 4 stars, so I must have liked it. It was a thriller. I remember the book started with her driving somewhere in the dark. That's all I remember. I guess it was good. So if you're looking for a short story thriller, that I guess that's one. Next up was Virgin River. This was not good. I think I gave it a 2 star, but I was being generous. I don't think I realized that this was listed as a romance, and obviously there's romance in it, like in the show itself. And I picked this up because I liked the show so much, and because the show is definitely more on the wholesome side. This is not that. This was very much a romance, and it was very much open door, and I did not like it. I think the first half of the book is why I gave it a 2 star and not a 1. I liked the first half of the story because it followed Mel and her story and why she was going to Virgin River, why she was moving. It talked about her job. It introduced a bunch of the characters. And then once the romance happened, that was pretty much the entire rest of the book. We got basically nothing from any of the other characters. They were just like flat characters, and it was not good. It was just kind of the same romance stuff happening over and over again, and I did not like it. So That was such a flop. I was so sad about that one. That was also the only romance that I read this past year. I don't read romance, and I don't think I would have picked it up if I knew that it was listed as that. I just kind of went into it thinking that it was going to be like the show, and it was not. The next book was The Martian. I loved this one. This was the only sci-fi that I read this past year, and I picked it up because I loved Project Hail Mary. That is one of my favorite books I think I have ever read, and so I definitely wanted to read another book by Andy Weir, and I'm so glad that I did. This was, I want to say that I gave it like a 4.25 or a 4.5. This book follows our main character, Mark, who is stranded on Mars. He gets left there and has to figure out how to survive. And the biggest issue is that everybody thinks that he died on Mars. And he is now stranded there, has no contact with Earth, and everyone thinks he's gone. So there's no plan for anybody to come back and get him. And he has limited resources, and it was very interesting. It was really good. I did see the movie years ago. I could not remember really anything that happened in it, and so I was excited to read this book, and I'm glad that I did. My husband and I are now planning on watching the movie again, hopefully soon. Next up is What the River Keeps. This was also an ARC that I received on NetGalley. It is a Christian fiction. I think I gave it like a 3.25 or 3.5. I have the full review up on Goodreads, and I am running out of time right now, so I'm not going to go too deep into it. But I did like this book. It reminded me that I can enjoy romance. I wasn't expecting this book to be a romance book, and it more so was. It was like a Christian romance, so it was clean. It's still definitely not my genre, but it was still good. Next up was Hurricane Season by Lauren K. Denton. I have really loved all of the books that I've read from her in the past. They're probably all 4 stars. This one, unfortunately, was more like a 3-star for me. I don't know if you can hear my baby crying in the background. I'm so sorry. My husband has her in the room with him, and she's very upset. Poor baby. Anyway, I did not enjoy this one as much. It kind of felt like stagnant. Like the same thing was happening over and over again. The story just wasn't like moving forward very well. Yeah, it felt kind of stuck for a while. Okay, next up was When We Were Friends. This is another short story that I read. It was also an Amazon First Reads book. I don't really remember what I rated this. I want to say that I gave it a 4, so I must have really liked it. I did. I gave it a 4. I don't remember a ton about it. I think just like the short stories are a little bit harder for me to remember unless I review them, which I did not review this one or the last one that I talked about. I remember something about a woman going into, I want to say like a bar or something, and she meets another woman and they become friends, but the friendship is a little bit toxic, and that's what's happening in that book. Okay, next up was The First Time I Saw Him. This was the second book after the last thing he told me. So this was the second book, and I liked this one as well. I gave it a 4. This was the ARC that I received. This was the third one, and again, another mystery thriller, definitely more of a mystery, and it kind of resolves what was happening at the end of the first book, and I'm glad that it did. I enjoyed this one. I would recommend that duology. I'm looking forward to reading more of her books. I actually have another one up here on my TBR cart that I plan on reading maybe this year. Next up was The Case for Christ. I read this one as not like a buddy read, but it was like a group. I can't remember. What is that called when you read it? Like a group read? I don't know. Anyways, I read this alongside a number of other women on YouTube. It was fun because they did, I think, 4 live discussions, and I had never done a read with other people like that and then been able to like experience the lives and stuff like that. So it was fun. I enjoyed this book. This was my 5-star. I would recommend reading this. This was a Christian nonfiction. Okay. Oh, sorry if you can still hear my baby. I'm trying to hurry. I think my my husband needs help. Okay. The last book that I read was The Hobbit, and I really liked this one. This was the other fantasy that I read this past year, and I have not yet read Lord of the Rings, but because I enjoyed The Hobbit so much, I am definitely going to read Lord of the Rings. I don't have a ton to say about it. It was very good. I was probably one of the only people who has never read The Hobbit. There was one part in the book I did not like. It was like there was just a section in the book where like the animals were kind of like behaving like humans. I do not like that in books. And that happened and kind of threw me off. And I kind of wanted to DNF in that moment. But I pushed through, and I'm glad that I did because it ended up being a very good book. And really quick, before I end this video, my best and worst books of the year. The best book that I read, even though I gave The Case for Christ a 5-star, I am going to choose a fiction book, and The Martian was definitely the best book that I read this past year. Very good. Would highly recommend. The worst book that I read was Virgin River, and such a bummer. It was also my most disappointing read of the year, and I was torn between that and Beartown, but I think I was going into Virgin River really expecting to love that book and did not at all, and because of that, that was definitely my most disappointing read. And the most surprising was The Housemaid. I did not expect to like that one as much as I did. I actually expected it to be a DNF, and it was a 4-star instead. So that is all of the books that I read in 2025. I am so excited for my 2026 reading year. I am going to keep a much closer list, tabs on the books that I am reading this year so that I can have a better stats video at the end of this year. But I think for the most part, 2025 was a great reading year, and I am excited for all of the books that I'm going to read this year and what my reading stats will look like at the end of this year. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.